Hi there, guys. It's Freddie again. We are going to be kicking off now with Module 5, which is Navigations and Charts. Some of you might be really well versed in this. Some of you might not have ever done anything like this before. So we're just going to go through the basics of using charts and using ways to navigate ourselves and show where we are and get the relevant information. So starting off, why is it so important? Well, it's because it's the process or activity of accurately ascertaining one's position, planning and following a route. It's also to assess the local environment and identify potential hazards and risks. Not only is this important for identifying hazards and risks, but also when you're dealing with air traffic control, they will want to know, like, for example, your longitude and latitude, exactly where you are, where that drone might be coming from, and so on. So it's really important that we're able to understand this and know how to do it efficiently. So I'm going to act like none of you have ever done a grid reference before. There's loads of different ways to pinpoint our location. Again, using grid references, postcodes, Ordnance Survey maps, grid systems, Google Maps. There's plenty of ways out there for us to figure out where we are. But you also don't want to be too reliant on technology. If you're in a place where you don't get 4G, you don't know where to go, using things like Ordnance Survey charts and knowing how to do grid references can be really beneficial to you. So we're going to focus now on using an OS map or an Ordnance Survey. I'll address it in the next slide, but your OS map is everything to do with the ground. And when you're using an OS map, you might use six-figure grid references. It's something you might have heard of before, but basically, on the left here, you see that the UK is split up into a number of different boxes with different letters inside them. The six-figure grid reference we're going to use as an example is just at the bottom here. So SK, it's around here, around about the Midland sort of area. The rules when doing a six-figure grid reference is you go along the corridor and then up the stairs. So we're going to take our first two digits here, 82. So we need to go along the corridor. We found 82 here. Think back to GCSE maths. In all of these little grids here, you've got a 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, then on to 83. So the number that comes after 82 is where we fall inside that square. So 6 obviously being just after 5, that our line is going to be just after the midway point there. So we've done the first 3 digits. Now we need to do the second 3. So we've gone along the corridor. Now we need to go up the stairs. So now I'm going up to 75, 70, 71, 72, 73, 74, 75. And here I am. Now it's the same process as we did before, but rather than going across, we are now going up. So 759, that means we need to go pretty much just to the top before 76. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. This is our six-figure grid reference, SK826759. You then get your Ordnance Survey map out, zoom into that location, and you get more information on that local area. So that's how you do a six-figure grid reference. Now, this is what I've just been talking about, your OS map or Ordnance Survey. In short, it gives you all the information for anything to do with the ground. Talk about your roads, your boundaries, terrain, bridleways, footpaths, topography, elevation, these contour lines that you'll see here. Understanding how to use one of these is really, really beneficial. Again, if you're an iPad kid and you've never used anything that is in the form of paper, you are going to struggle using things like this. So as a drone operator, getting your head around this is going to be really, really beneficial. On the flip side, you have your aviation charts. Again, as previously mentioned, some of the other modules, aviation charts are everything to do with the air. Aviation air, Ordnance Survey map, ground. In your aviation charts, this will give you all your information on flight restriction zones, your reserved airspaces such as prohibited, danger and restricted, what's your likelihood of any increase of air prox, and what direction might that come from. So you want to use both of these tools to your advantage to gain really good situational awareness of the area you're about to go to. Now, some aviation datums that we'll just quickly skim through. Whenever I'm referring to the sea level, as we see at the top here, we are saying AMSL, above mean sea level. Altitude is the height of the aircraft above the sea level. Elevation is the height of the ground above the sea level. Ground level is above the ground, or AGL, which we would refer to. And then height of the aircraft above the ground, which again, when we refer to our drone, our UAS, we say ASL. Now, just to be careful there, ASL above the surface level and AGL above the ground level, you might come across in your research with Vivia Online that they're using that same term to talk about the same thing. Certain sites I've seen use AGL to describe their drone above the ground, or ASL when they're talking about their drone. Just want you to be aware that there are certain sites out there that use contradicting terminology there. Now, speaking of terminology, we're going to go over the aviation units of measurement used by the CAA. So again, there's lots of different units of measurements out here, but the ones that the CAA use for long distances, we use nautical miles. Shorter distances, we use meters. Speed, we use knots, and height, we use feet. Now, this is important to remember. So when we are getting our longitude and latitude, there are about 3 or 4 different formats that your longitude and latitude can come in. In aviation, and especially when we're talking about an ATC, in aviation, we work in degrees, minutes, and seconds. Not decimals, nothing like that. It is just degrees, minutes, and seconds, DMS. That is the format that we use our longitude and latitude for in aviation. Please remember that. Don't get that one confused there. Now, again, I used it as that example before. Air traffic control need to know exactly where you are and where you're flying to. That is why we would need to give them our degrees, minutes, and seconds for our longitude and latitude. Speaking of latitude, that is measured from the equator up to 90 degrees north or south. And your longitude is measured from the prime meridian up to 180 degrees east or west. Thing to remember is that the prime meridian runs through Greenwich. At this point in the module, I'm going to go on to something called Drone Safety Map. Now, I've talked about how you can use OS maps and aviation charts. Personally, for myself, whenever I'm planning for an operation, I use Drone Safety Map. It is by far the most beneficial tool out there for drone operators because it gives you all the things I've talked about in one specific site, really quick and really easy to use. So at this point in the module, we're going to pause and we're going to go on to Drone Safety Map. Okay, so now I'm going to show you guys Drone Safety Map. And as I've said before, for myself personally, this is the most helpful tool you will ever use in terms of pre-planning. Now, I can use an Ordnance Survey map, but thankfully I'm never in a situation where I have no internet. I have the joy of being able to use this every single time. And it just makes your life so much easier in terms of all your planning. So if you want to, open a new tab, follow along with me. But I'm going to take you now to our Leeds flying location, and I'm just going to sort of show you how this app works. So LS27 7NG. So to start with, a lot of this might not make any sense to you. I'm just going to zoom out and we'll pause here. Okay. So what you are seeing here is Drone Safety Map. So you're seeing a lot of colors and a lot of things popping up. So we're going to start off first with the red. Anything red on Drone Safety Map is basically something that warrants your attention. So either it's a flight restriction zone, CTR controlled airspace, prisons, military zones, or whatever that might be. Now, on an aviation chart, you might be looking at these things. You're going to have to compare it to the legends. What does this mean? What does that mean? The beauty of Drone Safety Map is let's go, oh, I completely forgot what this means. What on earth is it? Give it a click. And on the left-hand side, I've got the description here. So Leeds Bradford Flight Restriction Zone. Now, through Drone Safety Map, certain airfields are actually doing this in certain flight restriction zones. Everyone's out to make a little bit more money, and I think these flight restriction zones have sort of clocked onto this. So you can actually request to fly inside this flight restriction zone with recreational, commercial rates, commercial with permits, and so on. Bit cheeky, but it's not for me to say. But on here, you get your summary, your vertical limits, definition of a flight restriction zone. So again, if you've forgotten everything I've told you, then you have all that information there. Similarly, I don't know what this bit of airspace around the outside is. What is that? Oh, yes, it's a CTR Class D airspace. Again, gives me what the regulated airspace is, the vertical limit, and so on. Now, you might come across things that you're not really sure on. Again, beauty of Drone Safety Map, we can just start clicking away. So this, what on earth is this? An equestrian event will take place. Yes, there's a temporary flight restriction zone. So we know that there. Now, you'll probably come across things like this, like these smaller ones. Now, think why there would be such a small piece of restricted or prohibited or whatever airspace it might be. Why would there be such a small piece of airspace that I'm not allowed to fly my drone in? Some of you might have already thought this already, but this will be things like prisons. For obvious reasons, they do not want you flying your drones over prisons for potential dropping in drugs and all that sort of stuff. Similarly, you don't want to accidentally fly your drone into this restricted airspace. Now, in the past, a lot of this is updating, a lot of this is changing. I know from my own personal memory, this restriction zone was much smaller than it is now. They're clearly doing this to make it much larger and not allow anyone to get anywhere near with their drones. So again, anything red is either these flight restriction zones, prisons, restricted airspace, something you want to know about if you're operating near it. What we're going to do now, because I don't like the layout of this map. It's a bit confusing. I'm not driving a car, so I don't need to know what the road map looks like. At the bottom left, similar to your Google Maps, we have a number of different formats we can go through to look at the map we're looking at. I like aerial because it just gives me a bit of context as to where I am. What we're going to do now, again, ignore the blue and yellow. We're going to come to that in time. So we're going to zoom into our location. Zoom into our flying location to here. So now you've noticed when I zoom in close enough, I'll zoom back out. When I zoom in close enough, a lot of yellow will start to appear, hopefully sometime soon. There we go. So anything yellow on Drone Safety Map is usually something which is called a sensitivity. Now, a sensitivity, it's not illegal to fly your drone near or over a sensitivity, mainly depending on what that is. But a lot of them, they're just there to sort of give you a heads up. It's not usually illegal to fly there, but you wouldn't be surprised if you miffed someone off by doing so. So, for example, the one closest to our flying site here is a cemetery. It's a Jewish cemetery right next to our flying site. Now, it's not illegal to fly your drone over or near a Jewish cemetery or any cemetery of any religion of that matter. However, you would be pretty understanding if someone was quite annoyed if you flew your drone into their grandma's gravestone, understandably. If we look a little bit north, we've got some primary schools. We've got Cobden Primary School, Farnley Academy. Now, you fly your drone near a primary school. Technically, not illegal. But is it a good look? Absolutely not. So we don't want to be doing stuff like that. So using sensitivities like this will basically help me figure out where things are, how far away they are, and I can plan for that accordingly. Now, I definitely don't want to fly near this primary school. This is my flying location. How far away actually is that? Well, the beauty of Drone Safety Map is next to your search tool here, you have a measure bar. Click on that. I'll get a small circle which I can click from my flying location, which is a left click, drag out to my area, double click on the right. I know I have Cobden Primary School approximately 1.16 kilometers northwest of my area of operations. Put that into my risk assessment. Now I know where that airspace is. So feel free now to just have a look at all these other things. Some will just say like ground hazard, like that doesn't give you too much information. Other ones, New Farnley Cemetery, what we've got here. A lot of these I haven't had a look at because there are so many. Western Flats Cliff Park. Now, at this point, especially an area like this, you're thinking, well, how many of them am I gonna have to mark? I'm going to be here all day if I'm marking every single sensitivity. Well, this is where it comes down to you as a drone pilot and your sort of planning. Because remember, we've already talked about it. You are responsible for the aircraft during flight. So think about what type of operation you're doing. If I'm doing just a roof survey of a house, one house, I'm going to be 30 meters off the air, not flying very far. If I were to lose connection 30 meters from off the ground, didn't have much wind, my drone would only probably travel a couple hundred meters before I hit something. So let's say I'm doing a roof survey of this house here. I would probably measure out from here about half a kilometer around, make sure there's nothing really around in that area. Now, if I was doing 3D LiDAR mapping of this entire neighborhood, where I need to be at, let's say, 400 feet doing big maps, well, then if I'm at 400 feet on this sort of area, I could fly for kilometers outside of there. So if I'm doing a full survey here, now I'm checking for sensitivities maybe on a 2 kilometer radius, checking for everything around there. So it depends on what you're doing. My recommendation when you start and you're doing your first operations, just plan for everything. As you get more experienced and more confident, you can peel those things back and not be too worried about it. So that is your sensitivities. I've rattled on about that long enough. Now, when you use Drone Safety Map, as much as I've been bigging up and saying how great it does have its faults. Now, obviously, satellite images are 2D. So you're probably looking at this flying site and you're thinking, wow, what a perfect field, nice and flat. We can do loads of flying. Everything's going to be great. Now, there are the two things we need to consider here. Number one, what is this? Zoom in. What is that? If you look closely enough, that is a power line. Now, unless you have incredible eyesight or you knew about that before already, like myself, you probably wouldn't see that. But now if we notice, we can see pylon, pylon, pylon. This is where drone safety map comes up good again. We go back to our bottom left, we have our ordnance survey map. Boom, I can now see that power line going directly across like that through my area. I can now plan for this and deal with it accordingly. But remember, on our ordnance survey maps, this is now also showing us that we are on quite a slope going up to the top here. So when I turn up to the operating area, I know that I'm going to have to do quite a hike to actually get to the top of that place. But then remember, if I'm at the top of that hill, I'm not going to see who's coming up from the brow and so on. So these are all really good things to consider. I'll go back to my aerial view. Finally, we're going to zoom out and we are going to look for blue. Now, the reason why I can't zip to a blue thing and show you is because they're never consistent. They're never constant, and I'll explain why. So let's zoom out, see if we can find one. Here we go. We'll go with this one, for example. So anything blue on drone safety map is a NOTAM, which we talked about previously. So this one here is personal photos of a small event. So that's a personal photo of a small event. What's this one over here? We got a site survey over there. What's this one up here? Air display. So again, NOTAMs, not illegal for you to fly near NOTAMs. But if you fly near someone else's NOTAM, crash into their drone, you're going to come off worse than them because they've done their due diligence of putting up a NOTAM, alerting everyone around to hopefully prevent crashes. You're the one that's ignored it, gone there, flown anyway, and caused a crash. So these are the different colors and the main things you want to use with Drone Safety Map. Again, I highly recommend that if you're bored, just have a little look around. Look at the different places you can see, what sort of restricted airspaces you can find. You find any military zones, any smaller aero clubs. For example, you see one here, much more aerofield. We've got Sherburn and Elmeet. So again, lots of different things we can see there. Look where you're normally going to be flying. You know what? Let's have a look at this. And this is what I'm talking about, Drone Safety Map. You could be scrolling one day and there could be something completely new. Now this giant blue piece of airspace is formation transit by multiple aircraft routing. Give me a bit of information. Thing with our NOTAMs, if we look down here, it's active in 3 days at 1 hour. It will tell me when it will start to when it will finish. So in your spare time now, or whenever you're planning, go nuts with Drone Safety Map, look at all the features and so on and so on. But I hope that's been a helpful little anecdote on Drone Safety Map. We'll go back to the presentation on charts and navigation. So as we talked about in Drone Safety Map, you might be looking at a certain area and you found somewhere which seems too good to be true. There's no sensitivities, there's no flight restriction zones, there's no reserved airspace. You probably think this is a perfect place to fly. Unfortunately, you are not the only person to think this, as the military are doing the exact same thing. So what we see here is that the military is split up into 20 separate low-flying areas. Now, these are some important stats to remember that we need to be switched on to. So in these 20 separate low-flying areas, you could have an £80 million F-35 or F-15 Typhoon fighter jet coming as low as 250 feet off the ground. Remember, we can fly as high as 400 feet. Tactical training areas, you'll notice there are 3 across the UK. One in central Wales, one on the English-Scottish border, and then one in northern Scotland. In these tactical training areas, again, these £80 million fighter jets can fly as low as 100 feet off the ground. You can fly 4 times higher than that with your drone. Now, you might have had it before. You might have been out to the Lake District or something like that, where you're walking the dog, you're going on a nice trip, and all of a sudden, it's like thunder and lightning. This jet just zooms straight past your head, and then you hear it. It's the exact same thing. I don't care how talented you think you are as a pilot, you are not going to be able to avoid one of these. Worst case scenario for you, you damage your £20,000, £30,000 drone at the most. But the worst for them is they lose a pilot and they lose a jet. So the thing with the military is that they give NOTAMs to each other and within the aviation circle, but they do not give NOTAMs out to the general public. So they're not going to let you know. And if you think about it, they're not going to go and say, hi there, we're testing our brand new fighter jet in this location from this time to this time. Please don't come and spy on us. They're obviously not going to do that. So it's on you to figure out if you're going to be in their way or not. Now, a couple of ways to do that. You can either go to the military low flying website here, or you can contact this number here. Now, you can record this down here if you want, but in your Dropbox in the introduction module, the number for this is already in your pre-flight planning form. So don't worry if you're not going to get that written down now. It's already in some of the learning resources that we provided you on your Dropbox. So you would give this number a call, let them know where you're flying, and they'll basically say, yes, you can fly, or no, you can't fly. Or if you can fly, we want you to keep at this height and only fly between this time and this time. There's anyone you don't want to get annoyed, and that's the military. Now, this next video I'm going to show you just contextualizes what I'm on about. You could be the maverick of drone operators. You're not avoiding one of these.
Canopies closed, throttles are up, engines are started and taxiing out for runway 25. The QFE is set 1012, weather looks lovely. And lined up, speed reads. Nose wheel straight. Just lift the nose off. There's 150, airborne, safely climbing, gear selected on. Gears up, lights out, now level 40,000 feet. We are clear, unrestricted descent. Overbanking, 8G, pulling down, idle, leaving 40,000 for 10,000. Lead looks good, weather looks beautiful. So we're now level 10,000 feet, low level checks are complete. Leads jet looks good for 30 feet. We're clear for low level and now descending. Low height water set, 250 feet. Throttle set, 420 knots. 3G round the corner. Looking ahead now, check the valley's clear. Weather's good, valley is clear. Leads through. Quick check either way. Now we're clear to the left hand side, 4G around the corner. Speed now, set 450 knots. Entering the McCuntleth Loop, North Wales. Hard bank to the left, lining up the overbank to the right. Overbanking, 5G over the top, speed now 420 knots. Back down 250 feet. Valley wall flashing past the left hand side. And shortly to enter into the Lake District, now back down to 250 feet. Hard left turn, the lead 6 o'clock is clear, the weather looks good ahead, lining up the valley. And speed's now coming up, 480 knots. Positioning for the overbank. Waiting for the lead. There goes the lead, and overbanking, 5G over the top. Throttles back as we descend back into low level. Low height water, reset, and throttles, idle. Height 500 feet descending. 400, 350 checks, 300, level 250 feet. Lead 6 o'clock is clear. Quick fuel check, fuel's good for Joker 1.
So that video just sort of gives you a little rundown on how incredible these aircraft are, and also how you're definitely not going to be able to avoid them if they're flying directly towards you. So please contact that military number. If you're in a place where you think it's too good to be true, it's probably the case. So give that number a call and make sure you're not going to be annoying any military aircraft flying by. So that is the end of Module 5. We're now going to do our recaps again. So we'll start off with the first one. So lines of latitude are parallel with what? Pause now. Lines of latitude are parallel with the equator. Where does the prime meridian pass through in the UK? Pause now. The prime meridian passes through Greenwich. What information could an OS map give you? Pause now. The information an OS map would give you are everything to do with the ground, e.g. roads, public rights of way, and bridleways. And finally, when and how would you inform the military you were going to fly? Pause now. To inform the military, you will contact them when you're flying in a military low-flying area or a military tactical training area. There's your number at the end that we mentioned there. So guys, that is the end of module 5, sorry. The next module, module 6, is going to be everything to do with meteorology. Well done for getting through module 5.